Hello, everyone. Welcome to Masters in Travel. Whitney here. This week, we have one of our most popular, most listened to guests that we've ever had on the podcast back with us. Jeremy Seulich is the CEO of Jet Set World Travel. How's it going, Jeremy? Good to see you.
Hey, Whitney, thanks so much for having me back on. Don't know if I deserve that intro, but I feel like I've come
It's true.
a long way from my humble beginnings of being known as Lindsay's plus one in this industry. So
I think you are now officially standing on your own 2 feet, and it's all thanks to Lindsay that we're recording today because Lindsay said, you should talk to Jeremy about coaching and mentoring. And I said, let's get it on the calendar because I'm sure it will be great. So, without too much fluff, tell me what's on your mind when it comes to coaching and mentoring and the travel industry.
yeah, no, it's at first I had this crazy idea, crazy meaning waste of time. And I'm like, maybe I'm just getting caught up in semantics, but there's been something I've been diving a lot deeper into. And it's kind of around the terminology around training, coaching, mentoring, and how this all kind of relates to the travel industry. I inherently, I think a lot of those terms get used interchangeably,
Yeah.
and it leads, I think, to very mismatched expectations from both parties, those that are receiving, but then also those that are in the position to
Yes.
facilitate each of these. And so
Mm-hmm.
really kind of diving in a little bit more in all of my spare time, and like if I had to define these, what how would I actually do it? And
Mm-hmm.
then it's led to some really really good conversations, some with some incredible people in the industry. And I think I've identified where maybe there's some confusion and where I think there's an actual gap in opportunity in the industry.
Cool. Okay. So let's first walk through your general definition or like how you think of the differences between training, coaching, and mentoring.
Yep. So I think the first one is training. This to me is what I think the industry does at its absolute best. And to me, this kind of comes from the roots of how the industry started with travel agents, of like you got employed at a travel agency and you needed structured, formal, learn this process, learn, understand this knowledge.
This is how you use the GDS.
This is the skill set, right? And
Yes.
it's
Yes.
this short term kind of very structured, predefined, set of like transfer of knowledge or teaching of a skill. And so
Yep.
it's very like directive, and it's obvious, generally very general. And
Hmm.
not that that's bad, but I think the industry does this very very well. And even as the process changes, I think most people have this box checked at least some sort of extent.
Yes.
Everybody's kind of got their own flavor and style, but I think the industry does a good job at training.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to skip over what I call this kind of this next bucket of coaching and go straight to mentorship or mentoring.
Uh-huh.
And that I feel like this is probably the next most used word in the industry. But I also think this is where I think it's probably getting misused. And so it wasn't until a mentor of mine kind of it was a completely different conversation, but the idea of this idea of mentoring came up. And the phrase, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, if there's an exchange of money, if this person is paying you or you have to pay this person, this is not a mentor. This is a coach or a consultant, or is something a little bit more formal. And this is not a bad thing. I
Yeah.
don't want to come in and say there's no mentoring in this industry. I think it's fundamentally different, and I think people are using the wrong words. And because they're using the wrong words, I think there's downstream effects that are causing a misalignment and maybe friction that doesn't necessarily be there.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Not good or bad, but definitely like I think you're starting to paint the picture of how like mismanaged expectations come in.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, mentorship to me is like it's 100% relationship driven. It's
Yeah.
this longer term process. It's where this person, call it, I'd say minimum one season ahead, but most likely 2 or 3 seasons ahead in some sort
Yeah.
of realm. The mentor is providing this guidance or the support or advice. I think often it looks way more informal.
Yes.
There's no set curriculum. There's a high level of trust that needs to happen here. Whereas, you know, with a training, it could just be like, you provide the material that I'm paying for, check.
Right.
And so to me, this mentorship is way more relationship and like about the growth and career development of this individual, and not for the exchange of monetary, but more so for the relationship.
I wouldn't say that I have like a lot of data points and like having really clearly defined mentors, but my idea of a mentor also generally is a combination. It's like more like life focused than business focused. Like sometimes business
Very
stuff comes
intertwined.
in,
Totally
but
agree.
also there's like a lot of personal stuff that like there's never like a we're here to talk about this. A mentor kind of conversation always feels like it's like, how are you?
Yes.
You know?
Well, it brings
And
context. They care about you as a person. And I
yeah.
think it's that 2 to 3 seasons ahead that gives them perspective of like, right now you might be working on a problem that's like this size, and it's a massive big problem because you've never faced anything bigger in your life. And again, not diminishing it, everything is relative, but like somebody can bring perspective and say, you need to like change your perspective, zoom out, or trust this, or ask hard why questions. And I think that helps, as long as it's being that mentee is being in a position to receive that
Mhm.
insight. I think it changes the dynamic. And I totally agree that it's so much more intertwined with personal aspect, because they're looking at you as a whole human, not just kind of this one realm.
Yeah, and I mean, what's been your experience with mentorship in terms of like how structured the like meetings are? Like when I
Yeah.
had a mentor, we didn't have like a standing call on the calendar. Like these conversations that ended up being very impactful for me happened serendipitously because we were so he actually was my boss in my when I worked in the hotel, and so I know that that kind of blurs the lines of like whether a payment like
No, I
technically he
think
was in
there's
charge of my salary, like
not really. I,
but
I think that's different. Like, you're not
okay,
paying them as
okay.
that insight, information is not being transactional.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So like the information he was sharing with me was not related to like the money being exchanged. Yeah. So, but like because we were in the same work environment, like the mentorship happened when it happened. And sometimes it was frequent and sometimes it wasn't. And sometimes it was like when we were like taking the elevator down to our next meeting. And other times we were at a lunch sitting for an hour talking about something very specific. So it also like this mentorship scenario in my mind is like far less structured and doesn't look like a recurring meeting on a calendar where we talk about a specific thing. It's more of like friendship, as you said, with someone who is 2 seasons ahead of you.
100% agree. And I think that's also what that mentor is pouring into you, not with any expectation of being able to receive anything other than knowing that they're helping somebody, do better in the world, or like it's a very altruistic, I believe,
Yes.
service.
Yeah.
And
That's,
because of
yeah.
that, it doesn't need to be this prescribed, meeting schedule. But I think that also depends on like the mentee's mindset, and that I've now, through different seasons, I think had different mentors. And so I've had longer term ones that I've talked with for over a decade, that are more all encompassing of like me as business owner and a father and a husband, and you know kind of like holistically. But then I've also like seeked out mentorship for very, very specific reasons. And I think that initiative and that burden kind of, I believe, falls on the mentee to kind of proactively seek and ask. So
So I'm so glad you said this because that you sought out mentorship on a specific topic because something that I hear a lot of people ask is like, how do I find a mentor? And I've always kind of struggled to answer that question because generally a mentor is so relationship based that you don't put in ads in Craigslist for a mentor. Like
yeah.
that's not how it works. So tell me a little bit more about what it looked like for you to seek mentorship in a specific arena.
Well, I think it's, you're not. To me, it's not putting the blanket statement of I'm seeking a mentor. That feels too broad and kind of like swimming in the ocean. So like, I think being specific helps in terms of, I say helps. I think it's absolutely necessary. And then it's putting that specific ask out into the world. And so it's, hey, I'm facing this problem. And so there's probably some vulnerability to it too. Like there's a
Sure.
lot of aspect of like, um, I get to talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, which is something that I love. That it's basically what Jet Set is, completely structured around at this point. But it goes even to friends outside of the industry, and they're like, "Oh, I want to seek your insight, but I can't tell you any about the idea." And I was like, "It's such a the I understand the cause of this fear of like if I tell people, then there's expectation or somebody might steal this idea, and I can tell you that of the thousands of ideas, like nobody's got time for your idea, nor do they care about
Let
your
alone
idea.
their own.
Correct. And so like I'm a firm believer, and maybe I'm a little biased in that I'm very much fall in the implementer, like operational type archetype, but like I believe execution is so much more like a good idea is a dime a dozen at this point to me. And it's more of like, can you execute on that vision? And so putting things like asking for help in specific reasons. And so, like, if maybe the person you're talking to can't help you, but the very easy next follow up question is like, well, do you know anybody that does have any insight in this? And like, start using that flywheel effect and the network effect. Flywheel effect is totally the wrong term there. The network effect of
Mhm.
like putting it out into the universe, and you'd be amazed at how quickly you could find somebody that is willing to help.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so at the at the risk of making you feel uncomfortable, you're sounding a little woo, Jeremy, and I know that you're not like a big woo person. But I wholeheartedly agree that like there are so many things that I felt like I was like up against like a brick wall in terms of a challenge. And the only thing holding me back was me just verbalizing that I
Yes.
was ready for help. And
Yeah.
like the minute that I said to someone else, and it didn't even matter who I said it to, I like verbalized a challenge and that I expressed needing help, and things just started to fall into place of connections or why don't you talk to this person? You could meet this person. And then pretty soon, things started happening. But it took months for a lot of these things for me to like just say it out loud that I needed help.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I am a eternal optimist. And so I fully believe that the universe is conspiring for every person's success. And um, my business partner and wife, who deems herself more of a realist, thinks it's a bit, thinks things through a little bit differently. But I don't know, time and time again, I feel like putting yourself out there often could be scary or vulnerable or showing how much you don't know. But in the
Mhm.
reality, what you don't see is from everybody else's perspective is not questioning who you are. It's more so of people want to help, and like people want to like give that person that sense of like, oh, I was able to be a part of, creating that, close that loop
Right.
for that person or give them that
Right.
growth. And so I don't know. I do think I want to take a step back. I do believe mentorship happens in our industry all the time. I just think it comes with a very different name or title, or maybe it doesn't. It's not even titled at all. And that I see this within JetSet all the time within like our group board of like how many how many advisors are helping other advisors for no
Yes.
benefit of their own. We have
Right.
advisors that have been doing this for 20 years, those that have joined 6 months ago. And
Hmm.
so, like, to me, there's a very informal form of mentorship that happens organically, I think, within this industry that I think is incredible and beautiful, but it is a very different service than what I believe our industry tries to label it, which I believe is more tied to the second bucket, which I call coaching.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding correctly, mentorship is absolutely happening in the travel industry. And coaching, how we would define coaching is happening in the travel industry, but oftentimes this coaching part in which it happens for an exchange of money or it happens like on a schedule or with a curriculum, like with these other parameters, it's being called mentorship.
Yeah.
And
And
so mentorship's feeling a little fuzzy.
mentorship's feeling fuzzy or getting, expectations attached to it that I think lead itself to a disconnect in, expectations from both parties. And while I do believe some coaching or consulting, I think also could be a replaceable like word in this kind of category.
Interesting
Um,
addition to the list. Yep.
I do
Mhm.
believe there is a gap in the industry when it comes to this bucket. So I think it happens either one inadvertently or two on a very niche or minor scale. Like I think if there was a gap in like this industry in terms of how we help bring and raise the level of all advisors, coaching is by far the lowest bar on this graph. And I think it's one of the most powerful like abilities that can help somebody help an advisor up level from where they are to where they want to be.
So define coaching for me a little bit in terms like how you think about coaching and how that differs from training and mentorship.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of crossover just in the heart of it being in the middle of these two different buckets. But to me, coaching is so much more goal oriented. I think
Mhm.
it is very much measurable performance improvements, like potential, like it kind of revolves way more in this functional space
Mhm.
for its like purpose or focus. I think it can go over any sort of time frame. So it could be a shorter scope. I also think it could be medium or long term because it's all goal dependent.
Yeah.
And I think the format is a very different blend of the two in that training, I think, is very structured and potentially even like one teacher to many students. Whereas I think of coaching way more in a semi structured space where I think it feels way more one to one.
Mhm.
It could be in a collaborative setting as well, especially in like more team oriented kind of situations. But I think for this conversation of like what the travel industry is doing, I think it could play out in a way more effective one on one structure. And because it's that, it doesn't that information can be tailored to the individual. And I think this is the biggest piece and probably my biggest
Mhm.
pet peeve in this industry. I think on one of the prior podcasts, I went off on a small tangent about this idea of generalized advice and how dangerous it is for, taking one quote or one soundbite and it's beneficial to one person but could be detrimental to the other.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's the danger of like trying to say training needs to be for everyone. Whereas like I think coaching is um, being able to understand the goal and then tailoring everything to the idea of how do we achieve this outcome, how do we achieve this goal to your specific situation.
Well, I think to your point, that's why training is so general and it is like high level is because it is literally created for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's I've always kind of like looked at training courses and be like, yeah, but what about my 112 questions that come after this? Because it's so high level. So is does coaching in the way that you've defined it, do you see anywhere that it currently exists in our industry in a way that is really good?
Yeah. So not to toot my own horn, but like I think this is something that Lindsay started when she founded or when she launched the agency out as its own standalone agency, and that so much of she had no intention of going and building her own host agency. I think maybe this is also a misconception in that like she would have been perfectly happy to join another host agency. There was just none that felt like she felt like fit the needs that what she wanted as an advisor and as an entrepreneur. So she's like, let's go
Mhm.
build our own.
Mhm.
And so I think it's been this intentional build out of without actually knowing the right words to like title it all. I think we were probably one of the bigger proponents of like we built out a training course because we felt like there was a missing need there. We talk about our mentorship, but I think we were probably misusing the words mentorship in a large way. And it's really kind of been through this discovery and the growth of the agency that I believe so much of what we are doing is, what makes Jet Set specific. And again, I don't want this to be like a specific plug for Jet Set. It's we look at everybody as a business owner
Yeah.
and an entrepreneur, and you just so happen to be selling travel. And so through that framework and through that like scope, what are your goals and how can we help you achieve it? Which is exactly what a coach does.
Yeah. So this is really interesting that you're kind of defining this because my journey with Masters in Travel and the Advisor Accelerator has been a little bit similar in that when I started it, I wanted it to be mentorship. And I kept getting pulled in the coaching direction
Yeah.
and I guess what I mean by that is like, I wanted to get to know people both personally and professionally and kind of provide guidance and add perspective because I was one or two steps ahead of, everybody at the beginning and ask big questions that might challenge them, but then let them just kind of take that and go back home. Like from
Yeah.
my intention was mentorship, but I keep getting pulled in the like, I could feel a desire from folks in the Advisor Accelerator for me to be a coach of like
100%.
more structure. We want to learn this. We want to learn exactly this. Next month, can we talk about this? Then we want to track the goals of like, this is the goal that I'm working towards. So let's measure this. And so, and I was fighting it for a very long time, being like, I'm not a coach. I'm not a coach. I don't know how to coach. I don't have it. But I kind of, I succumbed to the pressure after a couple of years because it was just what the desire was of members in the Advisor Accelerator. Um,
So wait, can I
but
ask you a question then? I want to flip the script and interview you. Like what change, how did that change how you showed up? And was there a psychological like shifting of like which hat you were wearing when it came to I'm mentoring this person versus I'm coaching this person?
well, I think that the lines of the Advisor Accelerator are a little bit blurred in a way that is not fully functional for everybody.
Hmm.
And so, because I structured it in a mentoring format, but they're wanting coaching, it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
And so, what I mean by that is like you said, coaching should be one to one. Or I've kind of thought of like coaching to be like kind of 1 to 4 or 1 to 6 maximum, like small group. Because I
Yeah.
do like I've always found with the Advisor Accelerator of like 1 to 1 makes me a little bit nervous, both as someone being coached or the coach, because I am someone that will sit in a classroom and listen to everyone around me, and I will really like learn a lot from what everyone is sharing and whatnot. So I personally like the small group approach to like gather different perspectives and different thoughts. But the Advisor Accelerator is one to many. So in any one call, there could be anywhere from 10 to 30 people.
Yeah.
So they want me to coach, but I'm more in a mentorship situation because I can't coach every single person 1 to 1. Now, when I do have a smaller group, and this happens frequently, and the more I get to know you and the more I know your business and the smaller group it is, and that means that these are the advisors who are showing up for every call every single month, and there are many that do, then I start getting more personal.
Yeah.
I know you, I know your business, I know what your sticking points are. I've heard you say the same thing month after month. So then a little tough love starts coming in. That's my coaching style is tough love. Like just calling it the way that I see it and kind of not really, like I think that when I'm like mentoring, I envision as a little bit more guidance and holistic and asking bigger questions that we don't have to answer right now in this conversation. I want you to go home and like think about it. Whereas coaching for me personally feels a little bit like, do you want to get here?
Yep.
And so I'm going to take a more concerted effort to ensure that we are incrementally progressing in that direction. And if that means that we have structured calls on structured topics, or if I'm challenging you on things that you've been dragging your feet on, like it becomes a little bit more intentional, and there is an opportunity for me to like hold you to what you tell me you want to achieve.
Absolutely. And maybe even stretch those goals because to you or to that person, maybe they are setting the bar high in their eyes, but they don't have an anchor or they don't have a good perspective of what is possible. And
Mm-hmm.
so I totally agree in everything that you were saying in this. I actually feel pretty validated in that I've had this idea in my head, and to hear that you are doing it in practice as well
Yeah.
kind of aligns this idea that it is this goal oriented outcome that it creates that sort of accountability in this idea of coaching. And I totally agree. I stress coaching on a one-to-one basis because I think that's where it's most effective. Small groups, I believe, totally work as long as goals are situated in the same directional. If
Exactly.
you've got somebody that's looking to optimize and maintain versus somebody that's like pedal to the metal growth, like yes,
Those,
there might be some general principle good advice.
yeah,
Largely, there's going to be a big mismatch in like the value added in that session.
100% agree. And I think that I've had this idea of kind of small group coaching in the back of my mind for a long time, and I haven't necessarily executed on it for exactly what you're sharing. It's really hard to find a small cohort of people who are all at a similar level in business, who are all striving toward the same goal, who all have the same date and time available every month, and who all want to pay to be like a part of a like to for the stars to align for that to all come together is difficult. And so one to one is probably easier to facilitate. Um, but yeah, coaching and mentoring are really, really different. And I think that I've even struggled with this definition and with this mismanaged expectations as well in my own journey as being when I'm leading the Advisor Accelerator and also as having ICs.
Oh, 100%. And it's not, don't beat yourself up in that. I think it's from good intention as well. Like all of these are very helpful, like action oriented verbs, like in the grand scheme of things. Like none of this is like, smoke and mirrors. I'm trying to pull one over on like the service I'm providing. I think if we can start getting the industries to start asking, not asking better questions, maybe that's not the way I want to phrase it, understanding the role and relationship that each one of these plays. And when you have a specific problem, you know how to better go about finding that result. So, like, if you want to learn about what the difference between an onsite and DMC is, don't go look for a mentor or a business coach. Like, there's training to be able to like can teach you all of that information. If you have goals to meet 10 million in sales, like maybe that makes works with a mentor, but it might be really good to find a business coach that's done that, or something, maybe not a business coach specifically, but somebody that's you could pay that could help you create a roadmap or a plan to achieve that goal and hold you accountable. And so like I think better questions and better framing can help for better outcomes across the board.
So I think the goal of like achieving 10 million is a perfect example of like, if that's a specific thing that you want to achieve and you want someone to help you get there, a coach is probably what you're looking for. What type of goal or outcome might somebody say they're looking for, and you might suggest like a mentor instead of a coach?
That's a great question. Intuitively, I think maybe it's level of involvement, kind of the differentiation in these lines
Mm-hmm.
between coaching and mentorship is this semi-structured setup versus a very informal setup, in that like the mentor is not going to be holding you responsible for the outcomes.
Right. They're not going to be
They'll
checking in on you
Yeah,
or,
they're going to
yeah.
give you the guidance and the wisdom and the encouragement, but ultimately at the end of the well, in all of the cases it's always going to be up for the person to do the individual work. But that mentor, if they meet with you 3 times and they notice that you haven't done anything and are asking the same question, they're going to want to stop. Like
Yeah.
I think there's
Yeah.
this aspect of like it's now more of a waste of everybody's time. So like I think it comes down to the mindset of, and maybe it's a both and question. Like I don't know if it has to be an either or. I think there could be something in which case, if I'm working on something that I'm deeply passionate about or I have a lot of conviction around, I don't care where that help comes from. I'm going to take all the help I can get. Like I'm going to admit that I want every like if the outcome is that important to me, I don't care
Sure.
how it comes to me or who's the one or how it's labeled. I'll take all of the above to like help
Mm-hmm.
achieve that outcome. And so
Sure, sure, sure.
maybe
Like, yeah,
it's a both and.
if you really want to learn something or achieve a certain goal, whether it's a training, a coach, or a mentor, they can all be great. But maybe we can leave people with like at the beginning we talked about like there might be like a mismanagement of expectations, both on the person offering the guidance and the person receiving the guidance. So how can we it's gray and it's nuanced and it's not black and white, but like how can we try to differentiate a little bit what should be expected from a training versus a coaching program versus a mentorship relationship on
Yeah.
both parties?
Yeah. So I think to clearly define the training, it's we have this knowledge or this skill set, and we're going to transition or exchange that, or transfer that information to you for this price.
Hmm.
It's, I think, the most transactional of the three groups.
Yep.
To me, coaching is all about, it is most defined being around a goal orientation of like, I am seeking this specific outcome, or this maybe even general outcome, but I need help, narrowing or defining that, or improving this performance. It's a very definable, I think, aspect. In which case, somebody has experience and has a track record of being able to do that, or has helped others do that. And
Hmm.
then mentorship, I think, is going to be way more on the relationship of guidance and support from somebody that is, you're not going to be, you as the mentee are not going to be able to provide anything to them, and that this is more a relationship driven aspect of helping this individual either avoid like trappings, or but helping them maybe expand past what their perspective is because they haven't been there yet.
So if somebody is thinking, I have an end goal in mind, it's a goal that I can achieve within 6 or 12 months. I would like someone to help me get there, but getting there not just in a conversation or two and then I go figure it out my own devices, but like structured, ongoing, like predictable conversations getting me from A to Z. Like this is the coaching part in the middle that,
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah.
to be honest with you, driven individuals, most often, I believe, with the right drive, could probably achieve the goals that they want to happen. What I think the benefit of a coach is that speed and time aspect.
Hmm.
That,
Hmm.
like, going back to, let's say you have a goal of reaching 10 million in sales. Like, let's say you can achieve that goal in 10 years, which is incredible. Like, by all
Hmm.
means, you are in a very small group of agencies, really, to be honest with you, that have been able to achieve that. If a coach that has done that, or has proven to do that for somebody else, can do that, can help you get there in 5, that is the acceleration of that is so much more valuable.
Hmm.
I think it's hard to, people don't even know the right question to ask even to get to that point. And so I think bringing awareness to this idea of having more specific goals, or seeking advice around more specific topics, helps
Hmm.
you clarify and reach those goals ultimately.
Yep. Yep. Where does consulting come in all this?
So I think consulting, I think, kind of shares a lot of the same crossover as coaching. I think intuitively, consulting feels a little bit more of a narrower scope.
Hmm.
Of coaching feels like maybe bigger vision and kind of not holistic in terms of you as a person and profession, but let's say business goals. Whereas like consulting, it might be very niche oriented. Of, I'm looking for, how do I optimize SEO for my website, or like I need to build out landing pages for these ads. I want to hone my sales pitch. And so to me, consultative business or services feels more specific.
Do you are you aware of any like consultative services in the travel industry, like from a travel advisor perspective?
Not as much on the travel advisor spot, but I also think this is a whole new, like, the opportunity and the growth of this industry has been so cool to see, especially post pandemic. And the caliber of individuals that are coming into the industry that are coming from other professional backgrounds, I think, is up
Hmm.
leveling the entire industry. And
Yeah.
so I don't, back, and again, to no fault of the industry's own, the foundations of being a travel agent, I just don't think lend themselves very much to asking these types of questions. And that this was, not for all, but a lot of times this was a job, and it was a
Hmm.
fixed salary. To whereas like we are getting a more entrepreneurial, more,
Mm-hmm.
you know, driven individual that is in control of, their earnings and their lifestyle. And so if that is the case, then they can, they've got levers at their disposal of this industry didn't even up until however long we started having this conversation, or Lindsay told you we should have this talk. Like, I don't know if I could have told you that coaching was needed necessarily, maybe, or it was missing even altogether. But um, it's one of those things that, if there was an established coaching practice or service presented, it might be heavily used. I just don't know if it formally exists or, has the name, quoted around it. It happens at the agency level, happens at the DMC level,
Yeah.
but not really
So,
the advisor level.
I'm just kind of thinking of all the things that I've heard that exist in the industry from the advisor perspective. I know that there are things labeled as trainings, there are things labeled as coaching, and there are things labeled as mentoring. Haven't heard consulting, but I think that there's a huge opportunity for that. But if we stick with these three, I think for anyone listening, now that we've started to kind of pull these three apart and clearly, distinguish one from the next, what are just a couple key questions you feel like advisors could ask if they see anyone who's offering anything, to just ask questions to manage their own expectations as to to ensure that what they're looking for is what that person is offering?
Yeah. I think evidence is probably it. I think this is a subjective answer. So I'm going to admit right off the bat, I think this is how I would go about evaluating it, but by no means is this the right way to do it. So heavy caveat on that. If I'm seeking out a coach, it's for a very specific outcome or goal, in which
Mm-hmm.
case I want to see that they've either achieved this in some sort of fashion themselves and or have helped others achieve it,
Mm-hmm.
or like testimonials of not hearing from them tooting their own horn, but hearing from those that have received results and say, yeah, they helped me achieve this, or like they're the real deal. And
Yeah.
so I think evidence, because it is such a high trust level barrier, and that you know the last thing I think you want to feel like you're doing is signing up for you know some online course that's claiming to be a coaching service but is really kind of falls more in the training category, and now you feel like
Yes. Yeah.
I was just one of many that was copied and pasted with general advice, and I think missing the mark there in terms of like expectations.
Yeah.
I also think having like I given that this is more tailored to the individual, of like, does that person's coaching style like jive with you? Like, is this something where you think it would be,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to spend money in this engagement with the expectation of a certain outcome? And while outcomes obviously can't be guaranteed, you still have to be the one doing the work.
Yes.
Is that coach
Key
putting,
asterisk.
yeah, is that coach putting forth like, if you do these things the way I'm like helping you, you should achieve these results, if not more. So like, I
Mm-hmm.
think there's an aspect of like, do you not get along with this person, but like, can you see this person actually envisioning helping you, and are you going to one be ready for the accountability, or being ready to be pushed or stretched, because that's what you're signing up for.
Yes. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think that for trainings, personality matters ish. Mentoring, it really matters, but it's more personal. I think for coaching, personality is everything. And you can have someone who is super accomplished, has great testimonials from other people they've helped, and they are fundamentally a great coach. But if you don't vibe with their energy or with their style, like I was saying earlier, like my style is tough up. Like if I'm ever coaching anyone and I see you not being honest with yourself, I am going to call you on your bullshit. Full stop. And I'm going to push you and challenge you. And that doesn't resonate with everybody. It really
Right.
doesn't. And so I think that if there is somebody, if you've identified or indeed looking for a coach and there is someone offering coaching services, then not only do you have their website and their testimonials and everything, I would even try to find have they been on a podcast interview? Do they have a
Yeah.
podcast of their own? Are there any YouTube videos? Are they on Instagram? Do they do stories? try to get like a sense of their energy and their vibe and their like approach to coaching, because there are many coaches that I've seen online outside the travel industry that's like, oh, I really value your perspective, but I don't know that I vibe with your energy.
Yeah. I think something that you touched on that immediately sparked like almost a reactive retort is like also like if you there should be some sort of consultative call. I think also of like, do
Yes.
we get
Yeah.
along? But like um the best coaches, and I think this even falls for mentors as well, are ones that aren't coming right off the bat giving advice and giving answers. So
Yes.
much of everything I've felt with somebody that's helped me kind of grow in either one of these kind of buckets are people that asked really, really good questions and
Hmm.
seek to understand and even put questions back on me. And to like that is often how I learn best. And so maybe this is specific to me, but um, somebody that comes out of the bat and says, here are all the answers and they don't know a thing about you, to me is
As a
either
consultant,
or like
right?
training. Yeah. I was going to say, I think it's like, here's this, it, if it could be a generic piece of advice, I think to be honest with you, it falls in that training and maybe even consulting. I'm still going to push back on this idea of consulting being answers only because nuance matters so much. And that like, if you're a travel advisor that is FIT only, then a consultant that's giving you like hotel booking advice might be completely missing the mark and driving you down the wrong lane in how you set up your process. So like,
Yep. Yep.
um, if there's here's also the other thing. Like, I think anybody that over promises in terms of like 100% of my clients, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, like
Yeah.
find also some aspect of like, is not necessarily humility, but does it feel like you're being sold something? Like,
Yeah. You probably are.
because you probably are maybe at that point. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. No, I think you've highlighted, so in terms of like managing expectations, maybe you've identified that you're looking for a coach and you found someone who's offering coaching services, but then you have to flip the table and try to understand, just because someone is offering a training or coaching or mentorship, is that what they're actually delivering?
yeah,
I think you bring up such a really good point that if somebody has more answers than questions, they're not delivering coaching, they're delivering a training, or they're delivering a consultation. If somebody doesn't ask you any questions about your business, but they're going to tell you how to run your business more efficiently or more profitably, that's not a coaching situation, even though they might call themselves a coach.
right. Or even a mentor. I think in like, and I'm not going to say, I, again, I think this entire coaching area has so much more to be explored, especially now that I think there are some incredible advisors that probably could, if they're interested in opening up different business models and structures, or maybe they're looking to transition out of sales, have successfully done things as a travel advisor and could coach and offer coaching services depending on whatever skill set or niche that they want to like look at. And I think there would be a really decent market. I also think host agencies are going to be shifting towards this as well. I think in an ultra competitive market, it's not just, what boxes do you check? It's like, how do you answer my specific goals and needs?
Yeah.
And those questions I think deserve good answers.
Yeah. And offering, a lot of host agencies offer trainings, which is good. They facilitate those trainings, but a lot of host agencies or organizations also offer mentorship. And if it's not one-on-one, it's not mentorship.
Right.
Yeah. I think this is really interesting. And I don't know like what the final answer to all of this is, but I think that you've raised some really important like just like distinctions and definitions between all, that I hope that advisors listening can start to better align with like what they're looking for specifically, and then hopefully that will help them find like whatever service is aligned, even if they're not calling it what should be called. As long as expectations are managed on both sides, then in the end that's what's most important.
Right. Going back to where we started, like at first I was like, am I just getting caught up in semantics and all of this? And like, this is a giant waste of time. But I think the reality is there's probably some something a little bit deeper here. And I'm not promising to actually have the answers or being able to provide all the answers, but I think this industry has still so much potential and is growing and has I think the opportunity set for everybody in and joining the industry for these next couple of years have such a awesome roadmap to succeed in however they want to define it, that I think areas of clarification, like around this idea of what do I seek out in a mentor, what should I ask in a business coach or a coach, what training do I need specifically, I think helps the entire ecosystem.
Um, Thank you for bringing this topic to the podcast and just being open to kind of talk through it. I don't think that it's only semantics. I think that there is something here. And so also keep me updated as your ideas and thoughts evolve on this, because I think that there's probably more. I think there's probably more that we can dig into on another episode.
Awesome. Well, I can't promise all of the answers, but I look forward to that next call.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, Whitney.